Hey guys, welcome to the show. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. As you can see, there was no intro because I just got an email from today's guest. She has come down with something and lost her voice, so it's kind of hard for her to be on camera and talk about fairies when she's lost her voice. That's okay though, right? Because we're going to talk about fairies ourselves. As a paranormal investigator, I've had my run-ins with fairies, and as you can tell, the internet's really jumpy. Lots of news out there, so just bear with me. And okay, if you're watching from Facebook, and a lot of you are, please feel free to hit that follow button if you haven't done so already. We're always looking to build up our followers, and also during the show, if you like see what you hear today, please be sure again to hit that follow button and hit that like button, and the happy faces and this heart thing that they do, which I can never do. It reminds me of the Vulcan. It kind of reminds me of the Vulcan greeting, right? So I can never do that stuff. If you're watching from I almost said TikTok. If you're watching from YouTube or any one of those days, if you're watching from YouTube, and you haven't subscribed already, please feel free to do so. I've got more than 1,000 videos sitting over there. The role of this show. The role of this show, and I decided to move everything over to categories to make it easier for you guys to find the shows. Because if you go in there, even I go in there, it gives me a migraine just looking. Okay, just looking at stuff and trying to figure this stuff out with all these shows gives me a migraine. So I decided to put everything in categories. So that means if you're a fan of Medium Nancy Matz, I know a lot of you are, you could just go click on the folder that's under Nancy Matz, right? And then you can see all the shows that she's done with us, and you can pick and choose whichever you would like to go back on and take a look at. Just like with cryptids, anything Sasquatch or Wolfman or anything like that related, you can go back and check that out in the cryptid folder. Okay, that being said, again, if you haven't subscribed already, please feel free to subscribe to the YouTube page. Also, same thing, likes, happy faces, all that good stuff if you like what you hear today. And and also chat amongst yourselves in the chat room. Today I'm really open to chat, obviously. So yeah, so this is the second cancellation this week. The first time was it Monday? Yeah, it was Monday because Streamyard was having issues. She couldn't get in, but Claire has emailed me saying that she has lost her voice, so it's kind of hard. I think that was the dog. It's kind of that was weird. I don't know if you guys heard that. It's kind of hard to do an interview when you don't have a voice to talk with. So what I thought we would do today, because last time I read from the book, from Bram Stoker's Dracula, and I don't want to. Last time this started to happen, I went through a book like within 3 days like that, and I'm not going to do that this time. So I decided, my team, being, I've been doing this for 18 years, long time, and we have had contact on 3 or 4 investigations with fairy folk. I've had contact with fairy folk in my own house. You guys might think I'm crazy. That's the whole thing with this paranormal thing, right? Oh, she sees things. She's crazy. But that's not. It's not what it is. It's. I've been doing this for a long time. You learn to recognize different things. When you're sitting in your own house or you're out at a restaurant, like going to dinner with Karen Clark at Outback Steakhouse over here on Arden Way, and going to sit down, and there's a shadow man standing in the window, peering in, watching everybody eat. I'll do that again because I flashed off. He was standing at the window, and he was doing this through the window, watching people eat. And then she saw it, and as we were coming towards him, he was facing us. And then just as we sat down, he disappeared. So at least she saw it. I had a witness. And then I asked another psychic friend of mine about it, who goes to that particular restaurant. And she verified for me that he is there. So we weren't seeing like a one time thing or anything like that. So he definitely was there watching people eat. And that's something that Nancy Matz has mentioned in the past, that after you pass away, the thing you miss the most, it's not the contact with people. Because I always thought it was the energy thing. Because like every time, like what I call getting goosed by a ghost, every time a ghost touches you, goes through you, or any contact like that, you're exhausted because it drains your energy. And I always felt that. Well, what they miss is that energy, that to feel your energy. And no, I mean it's partly that, but from what Nancy Matz has said, it's the fact that they can't taste and sit down and like have a cup of coffee and enjoy the aroma and all that. Okay, they just can't sit there and do that. So that's what they miss the most. So that's why this gentleman, this shadow man was standing at the window peering in at us as we were ordering, as we were sitting down at this restaurant. I guess he had been watching everybody else eat, ribs and everything out back, right? So it's all steak and ribs and all that stuff. So that's what he misses. It'll probably be me when I'm gone. It'll be ribs and I love ribs. McDonald's. McDonald's better watch out because I'll be at McDonald's. Another place that we visited over the weekend, my producer Maurice and I, we were over at Fred's Burgers over in Elk Grove. Excellent place. And I'm hoping that they allow me to do a review over there because the burger was great. I'm a connoisseur. I'm like a big hamburger, cheeseburger fan kind of person. So that was huge, and I liked it. For me to say a burger is really good, it's good. So yeah, so between that and like barbecue spare ribs, those are like my go-tos. Anything barbecue. Anyhow, so when we talk about fairies and fairy folk, and I know Mary Muter's been on here before, and if you guys remember the book, because she had written 3 books, and one of the books was about the fairy folk, Dear Flower Lady. And that was a particular fairy that she had come in contact with, and she had regular contact with growing up. And she had written a book on these letters that she had written, the Flower Lady, fairy wise. And I remember growing up, and you remember things like watching TV shows like Gulliver's. Remember like Gulliver's Travels. They had the Lilliputians running around. And what was it? There was a TV show out just recently. Well, not recently, but within the last few years, where it featured little people like that. I can't remember what it was. I gotta push my button here too. Okay, there we go. And I can't remember what it was because I didn't watch it, but I knew it's I used to see like previews of it and stuff. And if anybody comes in the chat room and can remind me what it is, let me know. But it had to do with little people, fairy folk. There's also a legend. You guys know I'm a Disney content creator. So there's also a legend at Disneyland about a leprechaun, and as the story goes, they've turned it into a children's book. Let me grab some water here, and I'll tell you about him. I don't know the name of the leprechaun, but just for a quickie, the story goes that when Walt Disney was getting ready to tear up the ground to build Disneyland, that Donald and Mickey, Donald, and Goofy came to the property to take a look at the property. And as they were walking the property, they came across this tree. And at the base of this tree was a little leprechaun. The leprechaun was very upset because because Disney was coming through to tear up the land. And Mickey, of course, being Mickey, leaned over and was trying to calm him down and say, "Look, it's not going to be anything bad. We're going to have children of all ages here, and adults and stuff. We're going to have a lot of magic here." And the leprechaun really got excited. At, it took some convincing, but he got excited because the minute Mickey said, "Oh, there's going to be a lot of magic here," is when the leprechaun started to buy into it. So Mickey and Goofy and Donald took him on a walk, around the park, around what was going to be the park, describing what was going to be where, Fantasyland and all that. And so the leprechaun said, "Well, maybe we could work something out." And the legend goes that, and I know there's more to the story, but I'm just saying, the legend goes that they did work something out, and it's interesting because for people that have been to Disneyland, there's an area, I think and I saw it, I just can't remember exactly where it is, near Pirates of the Caribbean, right, where there's a tree, like in the middle of the walkway. And if you look down at the base of the tree, you will see a door and a smokestack at the base of this tree. And this is what they did. They agreed, as long as the leprechaun agreed to behave and not cause any havoc at the park, he could stay there. And he could live the magic all the time, and he would have access to the restaurants and all this stuff, right? At Disneyland. So they agreed to let him live in Disney as a whole agreed to let him live in the trunk of this tree. And so I'm not saying it's not real, okay? Because I have some stories about fairies I'm going to share in a few minutes. But who knows? Because I mean, you go there, and obviously it's a Disney thing, right? Because the story, But who knows? Maybe he is there. But certain times of the day, you'll see smoke coming out of the smokestack of this house. But you have to know where to look. And if you're visiting Disneyland and you're walking near the Pirates of the Caribbean and all that, and New Orleans Square, you look down, you'll see the smoke coming out of this out of this tree trunk. All right, out of that smokestack. And at Christmas, they decorate it, they put lights on it and everything, or supposedly the leprechaun does. But the legend is he's still there. And so when the park closes at night, he goes out walking around and checking everything out at the park. That's his thing. And so I guess, like I said, there's an agreement that he'll eat the food there as well. But that's one of the legends, one of the big legends at Disneyland. In fact, if you look it up and Google it, there is a book about it, and I think it's called the Leprechaun of Disneyland. But this is supposedly happened when they were just starting to break ground at the park itself back in the 50s. So there's legends even for that. And then you look back on Disney, the legends and the stuff that they had read and turned into movies. I mean, you've got the Blue Fairy there with Pinocchio. You've got especially the most important, Tinkerbell, right? Tinkerbell's probably just as famous as Blue Fairy, if not more so. And what I liked was I never knew there was a Pixie Hollow there either. And you go, and there's a certain section, I had no clue. Hello, Jerry. And there's a certain section where Pixie Hollow is at Disneyland, and that's where Tinkerbell lives. And you go in there, and it's kind of like Alice in Wonderland. The plants are like super sized and stuff. So you literally walk into the world of the fairy folk, you know, with Tinkerbell and stuff. So it's kind of cool. But it's interesting because I'm here. In fact, I'm going to update everybody. Clara, the guest, has laryngitis today, so she cannot make the show. So here I am talking about fairies. Talking about fairies, treading unknown waters, right? So, yeah, so if you're ever at Disneyland, you want to go visit Fairy Hollow. I think it's called Pixie Hollow. Yeah, Pixie Hollow. Thank you for the correction. So yeah, you want to visit Pixie Hollow because Pixie Hollow is where Tinkerbell lives, and they have built up this whole thing, so you can visit. See how Tinkerbell lives. It's kind of like Alice in Wonderland, though. Like I said, when you go into Pixie Hollow, you're supposed to be the size of a pixie, so of course all the flowers and things are like ginormous when you walk in there. So it's kind of like when you go down the rabbit hole for Alice in Wonderland, and everything's ginormous, and you got the big caterpillars and all this. But it's an interesting thing, to think about Tinkerbell and all that. And Disney, is all about fairies and princesses and all that stuff. So that talk goes back years, and a lot of the stuff with the fairy folk too. If you go back, and I think that'll be our next project with Project Gutenberg. The books we read every Sunday. I think I'm going to find one on fairy folk because it'd be interesting to see the take from the 1800s. Because I'm sure the stories are different. But what's interesting is like by reading Project Gutenberg, like I have been, and some of the ghost hunter stories from the guys that were actually out ghost hunting, nothing has really changed from like the 1800 ways they investigated and the way they went about, looking at the stuff. It's the same now, and all these years later. So I'm just, it'd be interesting to see if this whole thing with the fairy folk, the fairy legends, are the same or different than they are now, because there's a lot of fairy legends out there still. And you can count different things as fairies. You can count different things as leprechauns. Like I said, we were going to talk about some stuff that my team has run into over the years, and one of them up here in the Gold Country. Excuse me for turning. I'm really relaxed. I'm just kind of unwinding. I wish my chair didn't make that god awful sound. Someday I'm going to get myself a nice gaming chair. You know, red and black game. Um, it depends on what you think of fairies. Like I said, the leprechaun. I don't know if a leprechaun is considered a fairy. I'm not. I'm not well versed on the fairy world. But I'm thinking about Tommy knockers. I live in an area in Northern California near where the Coloma gold strike was, and that's what brought everybody out from back east and west. Everybody out back from back east to California to pan for gold and mine for gold and all that. For riches and silver and all that stuff. And there's legends, and it was a melting pot. California is a melting pot, just like the U.S. is a melting pot, but California especially. It was interesting over the years ghost hunting to find out that you always think, and this is one thing that we've always been ingrained, is that Asians, China, Chinese in particular. I'm trying to stay woke here. Chinese in particular used to come and work at all the mines because it was cheap labor. But I found out that at the other end of the spectrum, out in Sutter Creek, like at the other end of what I call going south instead of north, there were Hawaiians. There were Hawaiians that actually came and worked inside the mines and whatnot. So I was surprised to find out. I had no idea, but there were Hawaiians and other races that came out to mine that because like I said, I'm used to hearing about the Asians, the Chinese, right, right. So that surprised me. So you never know, and that's why, and also Dutch. You got Dutch, you got Scottish people that came over here, and uh, people from Norway, came over here to work in the mines and whatnot, and that's why some of these legends have cropped up. And one of the legends that has cropped up are the Tommy knockers. And I remember father used to order Time Life books on the history of California. I still have some of those, and you would read about the 49 whatnot, which is what was out here for Gold Rush, and you would read about these guys about the legend of the Tommy knockers. But then he started ordering, and for I don't know, because he was interested, in the paranormal before I was interested in the paranormal. I'm talking, I was like maybe 8, 9, 10 years old at the time. So I didn't care. I mean, I had seen stuff in my house, but at that point I didn't really care. I didn't put two and two together like I did later on. And so he had gotten like 4 or 5 of these books. I wish he would have continued because he did not complete the set. But there were two in particular, and one was having to do with like seeing doppelgangers and things like that. Over Irish. A lot of that book was about stuff that was in Europe. And one of the things in there was about the Tommy knockers, and this is something that was brought. Tommy knockers is they're kind of like a dwarf or a troll, and they're only about maybe 3 feet tall at the most, and they wear overalls. They dress like the miners, and they would appear when there was going to be a cave in, because they would hear them knocking and stuff, and that was the whole thing. We had the Tommy knockers that they would hear knocking like that, to let them know that something was up with that the construction was coming down. But the other thing is that they were pranksters, so they like to steal food and stuff. So if they had their lunches, if the miners had their lunches out, the lunches would disappear and things like that. Well, there've been a couple of investigations that I have been on, and one before I was owning my own group. When I was filming, because California Haunts used to be a TV show that was filmed for public access TV here in Sacramento, and here in Sacramento and Woodland. And so uh, we had gone out to this particular restaurant that was a very popular ghost hunt place up in, I think it's Sonora. And the dining room essentially is built over the top of the mine shaft, the opening to the mine shaft itself. And so not so much me, because when I was sitting there, I was seeing like orbs flying, but they were like golden colored, of all things. They were golden orbs flying. I've never seen golden orbs since then. Hey, Jerry. And so out of the corner of my, and then the psychic that was sitting with me went, "Yeah, you seeing it? Just ignore it and eat." And so she was seeing them too. But the thing was, she mentioned, once the restaurant closed down and we got into investigating, she mentioned that she saw the Tommy knocker. There was a couple Tommy knockers standing at the entrance to the mine itself, and she had seen, she saw it. And it's just interesting that she saw that. That was my first encounter with Tommy knockers up in the Gold Country. And then later on, we did an investigation up in Camino of this house, and the reports were, and they had seen this individual clearly in their home. The reports were that they saw this little man. He looked like one of the seven dwarfs, with the beard and all that, overalls, and he had the helmet on his head with a light, and he was running around their kitchen and living room, and they would see him off and on, and they would hear him. They would hear his footfalls and all that. And so I knew before even going out there what we were dealing with, because it turns out, as I did my research, the house was built next to an old mine shaft. And so this is what this was. This Tommy knocker was coming in, but he wasn't. I don't think he was. You know, with the investigation that we did, it wasn't just him. There were other things in his house as well. But as far as his part of it was, um, he wasn't doing anything malevolent. There was no collapse in the mine or anything like that. He just wanted to kind of tease the family, because objects would move around the house. Like they'd set something down, and then they'd go to find it, and it would be somewhere else in the house. That kind of thing. So, like I said, the Tommy knockers can be playful as well, and this is what this Tommy knocker was doing. He was playful. He was just trying to tease the family. But what I suggested they do, and the funny thing about it too is the other thing is that, again, you talk about food, because the Tommy knockers like food, and so they would put their dinner out on the counter or on the kitchen table, and it was like, if you guys remember the movie The Santa Claus with Tim the Toolman, right? And when he's in jail, and the policeman is sitting there at the desk eating the donuts, and he sees the door open, but he doesn't see anybody come through the door. And after he sees the door open, he sees the top peak of the hats that the dwarves are wearing, and they're doing this, as they're walking in front of the desk. And then he finally looks over and sees the dwarf sitting there. This is what the client reported, was that they would be sitting there either at the kitchen counter bar, because it was like a bar, a raised bar. They had chairs there, or at the table. But mostly this, that he wouldn't see the Tommy knocker directly, but he would see him walking. He would see the head bobbing up and down like this. So that was something in and of itself, to see that, and that's what he reported. But his wife reported that she had seen this little man that looked like one of the seven dwarfs with the overalls on and all that. So getting because they're connected to the land and all that. I mean, it's hard to release them. Like people say, "Well, get it out of my house, get it out of my house." The best way is live peaceful with them, and one of the ways to live peaceful with them is to go ahead and just leave food out so they can eat. And so that's what I suggested the client to leave food out every day, whether it's a wing sandwich or whatever, so this Tommy Knocker could get a snack. And once they did that, all the stuff stopped being moved around, because they acknowledged that he was there. So that was one of the contacts we had with Tommy Knockers over the years. Um, then you start coming in contact with fairy folk. I was on YouTube the other night because I do things after. It sounds bad. I do things. I like to watch YouTube videos and stuff because I like to do critiquing as well. I have a got ghost thing I do over on TikTok, and sometimes I'll post it on Facebook and YouTube. And I can be real critical at times. But I mean, it is what it is because as a ghost hunter, unless you're physically on scene to see how the conditions that these photos and these videos were taken, you really can't say that they're true because I mean with the advent of Photoshop and especially CGI and now AI technology, the photos really photos and video really well. So you have to really be critical. So unless like when people send me photos, which I get all the time, hey, it's a ghost that's happened at my house, blah blah blah. I cannot verify what they have seen because I wasn't there. Okay, because everything can be done. Plus, what people don't realize, and this is something that the normal person doesn't realize with photos. Did you know that if you take a photo and you fake it and you send it into me, I have Photoshop on my laptop. Did you know that I can click on that photo and I can see exactly how it was shot? It'll tell me what effects were added, if there were any effects added. It will tell me, what time it was taken, what settings the camera was on, what type of camera it was. So it's really hard to fake stuff because that's anybody that is involved. Like I'm also a photojournalist, so I'm really good with Photoshop. Anybody that has used Photoshop or anything like that will be able to click that, and know how to click that. Same thing with videos, and you can tell when something's been CGI'd and whatnot. So yeah, faking's getting harder and harder. However, AI really has taken it to a new level. You have to be really careful with AI. And I'm noticing like Instagram lately, when you post a photo on Instagram, a little notice comes up at the bottom saying, if this is AI, click on this. Because you have to people that a photo that you take is AI because it's not right. To give you an idea real quick, I know I'm going off on this tangent from the fairy folk, but to give you an idea real quick, as a journalist, when you take a photo, and let's say you sometimes you're in a hurry, so you have to take whatever you can get. You might be on the run following somebody, so you get Joe Blow to stand in front of a tree or a sign or something, or you don't realize they're standing in front of a sign. They stand in front of a sign. You take the photo. It looks like they've got a sign coming out of their head, a pole, right, or a tree coming out of their head. So you go back to the office, and what do? You remove the tree via that particular thing that's sticking out of their head via Photoshop. The second you do that, you have to say it's a photo illustration before you print it in any kind of media. You have to say it's a photo illustration. The problem with AI, the way things have been going with AI, is not everybody is as honest. So they'll just put the AI out there and not say anything, right? Oh, it's a great photo. God, how'd you get that shot? That's pretty awesome. But it's AI. But I'm seeing now, like Instagram, I haven't seen it on Facebook yet, but Instagram, it's funny because Facebook and Instagram are connected, right? But on Instagram now, when you go in to post a photo, any kind of photo, there's a thing down at the bottom that will pop up and say, hey, is this AI? Click on this because you're going to have to tell everybody it's AI. Because there's a lot of stuff going around right now that people aren't aware of. I see it on Facebook all the time. I'm seeing it over on Instagram, YouTube, and I'm forever pointing this stuff out. And I remember being on Instagram and I made a comment about how I was afraid of this AI because they can doctor anything, with it. And I had people come and jump me over on Instagram saying, "Oh, you're just a scaredy cat about this because of your job and blah 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 blah." No, it's. I mean, it's bad enough that people can Photoshop stuff, but this Instagram, you can make it look so smooth that with the AI, that you don't even detect it, and that's what's frightening about this AI technology. So I'm glad they're starting to crack down, because if journalists have to, literally say, okay, I did this to the photo to change it a little bit. Here it's a photo illustration. AI should have to do that as well, because otherwise it's misleading to the public. Okay. Anyway, getting back to this. So when I get these ghost photos, I'm very critical of them. And just like if I see a ghost video, I'll watch it over and over. Make it as large as I can. Sometimes I'll even watch it on my 65-inch TV just so I can see what's going on, because not everything you see is real, but they can make it look so real, so real. That's why I'm glad there's people like Kenny Biddle out there who are able to dissect this stuff and really go through these alleged ghost videos. I'm getting better at it. That's why I'm probably going to have some coming out this week too. I just my team members send them to me so that I can look at them and see and decide whether or not they're real or not. And I'm always putting the disclaimer on there. Like I said, even though I may say the photo's not real, the disclaimer's there. Hey, you know what? I don't know, I wasn't there. However, if you want me to come out to your house or your business, I'm more than willing to come out with some of my team members and take a look. So there's always that open thing, to come out and really take a look at what's going on. I've never had anybody take me up on the offer. So, sometimes when I end up debunking a video like that, that sometimes tells me that, yeah, it's a fake, because if they don't want to let you out to their place or whatever to take a closer look at it, that means they're hiding, generally will mean they're hiding something. Okay, it's enough of that. Enough of that tirade. Let's talk about fairies. Okay, so later on, we got as we started to do cases. You don't run into the fairy folk cases all the time. You just don't. It's very rare. But when you do, it's very interesting. I mean, I have even heard. I was doing an investigation uh, during COVID that we went out. We were doing very rare investigations on COVID. We were only going out. We had to do with a couple of young kids, so we went ahead and did the investigation. And we went out to this house, and it had the street it was on wasn't too enough though. Enough to kind of make us suspicious, about what they were claiming. Like they said, they were hearing voices and little tiny voices, and things were getting moved around the house, and drawers were, drawers and chest of drawers were opening and closing on their own, and things like this. So I was kind of suspicious because of the street, because sometimes, um, the house had a small basement underneath. It was a crawl space, so right away, you got give in the floor, no matter what. So as you walk around, you can see stuff kind of moving, as far as furniture. So I mean, if a car went by or a heavy truck went by, there could be movement, on the floor where things would move off the counters and whatnot, and bounce off the counters. So that was one of my first suspicions over there about what was going on. In fact, the chest of drawers that they kept saying would open, I debunked, because they were fairly new, and the ball bearings in there were so loose that when you walked in front of it within about like 2 feet in front of the chest of drawers, the drawers would pop open. So that was a total debunk. But they had claimed that in the one bedroom, the furniture would be moved and they could hardly get through the door. And this was happening all the time. It was the son's bedroom, and the son was autistic. So we do the investigation, and of course, me, I'm more on the skeptical side. And I remember when the sensitive that was handling the investigation came up and said, "You know what? I think it's fairies." And I said, "What?" So I was like, "Fine," and I agreed with her, and I thought, "Yeah, whatever." So we're walking through the house, we're crawling in the crawl space, and trying to figure it out, because the client claimed that they could hear these fairies talking amongst themselves. And so, of course, as part of our debunk process as investigators, we're sitting inside the house. I've got people walking behind the house. I've got people walking, going to the neighbor's house on this one, and standing by the fence and talking from the outside. And then I've got people walking on the sidewalk part by the street, just so I can hear how the voices are carrying, to see if we're getting voices from outside. And even I had people even stick their heads in the crawl space and talk, because I wanted to see if that would rise up. And none of that did that. And as I'm sitting there, and it's not really quiet because everybody had gone outside to have dinner, there's like a picnic kind of thing. I'm hearing voices. I'm hearing voices talk to one another, and it's male and female voices talking. And I get up, I'm walking around looking to see what's going on. And this is like in the living room. I'm sitting in the living room, and it's like the voices are in the room with me, and I'm hearing it. And I had the recorder going, and so I start walking around, looking around. There's no one around because everybody this house was on some acreage, and so the team and the client were probably, I would say, a good 100 yards away from where I was inside the living room. So I was hearing these voices. I'm looking out the window. What are we picking up? So I decided to pick up my digital voice recorder to do a playback. And when I picked the recorder up, it was still recording. But guess what? No voices. Yeah, and I could hear them really clearly. And so, yeah, I started to wonder about the whole fairy thing, that my psychic had told me. And then as the investigation wore on, it pointed more and more towards fairy folk in this house. And they were just mischievous. They were stuck on the land, and they weren't going anywhere. That's the essential thing. But what the whole gripe was that they didn't like the way the client was landscaping the backyard thing. They didn't want the backyard touched. There were certain things in the yard that they felt that they wanted. So the agreement was that the client would um, clean up the backyard and do the necessary work in the backyard, but that there were certain plants out there that they couldn't cut down because that's what the fairy folk were worried about. So you never know. And as far fetched as you might think this is, I agree. I agree 100%. Far fetched is far fetched, right? Because I mean, unless you see it for yourself, you're not going to believe it. And that's, going in when she said it was fairy folk, I was really not buying it. And I thought, okay, I'll go with the flow on this one. And so that was a conclusion on that one. That was fairy folk. And that's not the first time. I mean, we have been out. And there was another case we did up in Folsom at this house, and it turned out, according to the psychic, that it wasn't only the fairy folk there. We had Native American um, entities as well in this house, but we did have some fairy folk moving stuff around the house. They're very mischievous, very mischievous. And it's interesting because that's where that comes up to do, where you have to sit there and think: is it a ghost? Is it a poltergeist? Or is it like fairy folk moving stuff around? Who knows, right? Who knows? I've had stuff happen here. I mean, I can't explain. When I was little, my sister, I must have been 9 or 10. My sister used to amuse me with, it's kind of like the dogs and cats that, the laser pointer right on the wall. She used to do that with like a shiny object, and reflect it with the sun, and because we had dark paneling, and so she'd tell me it was Tinkerbell, and so I'd sit there mesmerized in my dining room thinking, oh my God, Tinkerbell's here as a kid. Well, a few years ago, and I have a very dark hallway. In fact, I have the floor painted black in the hallway, and there's no light that can emanate in there at all, unless there might be a refraction, from the sun. But at this point, it was like winter. It was like 9 o'clock at night, so there's no refraction at all from anywhere coming in. And I had a light dancing around my hallway, just like similar to the light that my sister used to do with the reflection thing. And I watched this thing, and I'm standing there, and it's just bouncing all over. And so I get a hold of one of our team psychics, and they said it was a fairy. So, again, who knows, right? And if it was a fairy, it must have been a good fairy because it was nice and bright. But we have, getting back to the case in Folsom, I got to regress. I'm getting ahead of myself. What else is new? Getting back to that case in Folsom, they had objects moving around as well, and they didn't know why. And part of it was poltergeist because the husband and wife would get in these arguments, and they wouldn't come out of the arguments. They wouldn't come to an agreement before they went to sleep. So then they would hear banging in the walls. That wasn't with the fairy folk. The fairy folk were moving stuff around. The fairy folk were in their daughter's bedroom, talking to the daughter at night and playing with them and turning on their toys. And turning on her dolls and stuff, like the dolls that, those kind of dolls that eyes open and close, and they'll say mama or something. Yeah, the doll would be in bed with the daughter, and then that would come on. And sometimes you'd think it was a kid, but this one, yeah, the psychic, of course, it was definitely fairy folk that had been on this property before they built the house. So like I said, we've come in contact with fairy folk quite a few times. Well, not quite a few, but enough to know the difference between fairy folk activity and poltergeist activity when we're on an investigation. It's just interesting that, you know, all the years that we have been investigating that, you'd think we would run into it a lot more than what we do, but we don't. It's kind of like demons are in a way. when I first started doing this 18 years ago, there was hardly any time you'd run into a demon or any real dark stuff. It was always Uncle Bob and Aunt Harriet or whatever in your house, or grandmother, grandfather, things like that. And now, because there's so much more awareness with these TV shows, and everything in the TV shows has to be a dark entity, now you tend to run into more cases that are dark because not only are people thinking they're seeing dark things, like the second the spoon moves across the table, people are thinking that it's a demon right away. So the more they think about it, the more they're able to generate it via their mind that it is something bad, and that's. I have a 20-year-old dog, and so I have my 6-year-old, and then I have my 20-year-old. Someone might be at the door too. But anyway, probably someone at the door. Anyway, yeah. So I lost my train of thought with all this. Hello. Okay, it's my house. It's how my house is. But people are able to create and bring in bad energy just by thinking about it. It's kind of like when you get in your dark moods, and then you draw stuff in, and you wonder why the bad stuff keeps coming to you until you change your thought patterns to be more cheerful. Until you change your thought patterns to be more cheerful, and then all of a sudden your luck and karma changes. So you have to be able to control it, and that happens the same way. You start seeing things moving around your house, and right away you think it's something dark, and you start dwelling on that, and then it does become something dark because of your mind. Good study of that was the EVP study with that, and where studies done where people have been generating responses onto digital voice recorders by thinking about it and creating those entities to talk on the voice recorders. Good example of that is there's a restaurant called Latitudes up here in Auburn, California, that was a very famous place for ghost hunting. And it turns out that in this restaurant, there was never really haunted. It was something, a story. This is what I got. I don't want to get in trouble with people, but this is what I heard over the years, that this ghost that was technically in this restaurant was created mentally by the ghost hunters and the owners for the story, right? So it never really existed. I mean, I've been up there myself. There is a scent of vanilla when this ghost supposedly comes around, and it's like it's really been built up over the years. So people have created this ghost that is up there. It can be created. Um, like I said, EVP friends of mine that have worked that are really in the EVP field have done this and been able to create ghost voices by just thinking about them and generating that voice. So this stuff can be created on your own, just like the poltergeist. But poltergeist activity, was like I said, that couple, they would have these arguments and they wouldn't resolve them when they went to bed. I remember the Brady Bunch, you guys. The saying was, Mike would tell Carol at night after they were finally resolved their argument before they went to bed, right? That's what that is. If you don't resolve your argument and you're carrying all that anger, you might cause poltergeist activity because that energy will come out during the night. And that's what happened with this couple. However, there was also fairy stuff going on. That's why you have to be really careful when you go out on these investigations to really weed out and see what's going on. Because not all that activity was from her being, her poltergeist issues. This was also from fairy folk that was causing this, causing these things. And so that's why when we go out with our big questionnaire, we're looking at everything you can think of. We're looking at, we're looking at dark. We're looking at fairies. We're looking at all that stuff in these cases. Is it common to find fairy folk out here? No, very very seldom. And sometimes you don't find it if you're not looking for it either. That's that case. So yeah, so I mean it's not as common as people would think to find fairies. It's very uncommon. But you hear about it more. You hear about it more like Appalachian places like that, and of course over in the UK. There's a lot of stories. There's stories, over in the UK, and I think there's some even over here of young children being, I don't want to say kidnapped, but they disappear. And when they come back, they have these really wild stories about being underground. And and they're underground with fairy folk. They're underground with people, little people they call them, and so they get to see the whole world of fairy. Now sometimes when they disappear like that, it's nothing bad. The fairy decide they're going to keep them, so the kids, the children end up becoming fairies themselves. That's how the legend goes. I could be wrong. Probably a bunch of people yell at me after the show. But yeah. So these children will reappear. People will find them again, and the children will have stories about seeing these little people under the ground. So it's fascinating to read when you really get into it and start reading up on this stuff. And there's so many types of fairies out there. I mean, you've got this here. You've got the wood sprites. For like when you're out in the woods and it's just like the trees, and you've got all these different fairies. You've got the ones like Tinkerbell. So to do the research on the books are like this thick when you start getting into them to research. That's why as a paranormal investigator, it's really important to have, like I said, someday I'm going to share my library with you guys back here because I have almost every kind of paranormal theme book you can think of so that I can really start hitting it hard. Some of them are those Time Life books. I mean, those Time Life books taught me a lot over the years. It has a lot in there, doppelgangers and all that stuff. So, you know, but you have to be able to do your research and understand stuff, or you talk to somebody like Mary Muter, for instance, grew up talking with fairies and seeing fairies. Who am I going to call if I need information? I today Claire, the fairy whisperer, or I'm going to call Mary Muter to see what she thinks about whatever we're in contact with being a fairy. So you have to have you have to have the material to do research with before you even can make a conclusion for people. So it's an interesting field to be in. And I wish Claire would have been able to talk today because I had a lot of questions about green fairies and different types of fairy folk. Again, it was on YouTube, and I watch YouTube in the evenings after I do the show to take a little break before I get into other work. And I was looking at these videos. They're supposed to be the world's best paranormal videos. Some were taken in cemeteries, some were taken in homes. But one with me, and it was interesting because, like I said, again, I didn't shoot the video, and Photoshop and photo video video software like Corel and all this other video software, CGI's out there, and of course we get back to AI. They had one in particular that was of a tree, and I was eager to show it to Claire today. And I'm going to hold it comes on, so you guys are going to see it. Sorry. So I was eager to show it to her, and it's kind of like this tree, and where the tree splits off, for the top portion of the tree, to branch off, there were like 5 little people in the nook of this tree, and they had claimed these people, the people that had sent the video in, claimed that these were fairies from the tree that lived in that particular tree trunk. So was it real? I don't know. I would have liked to talk to Claire about that, but I have heard of cases of that. That's why if you notice when you go to Walgreens or whoever or Walmart or wherever to buy stuff for your garden, and they have these little fairy houses that you can hammer or attach to your tree trunk. So there must be something to that where people believe that these fairies are existing in tree trunks or existing at the bases of trees, because you can buy that stuff to build to build in, like the one at Disneyland, right? Like the leprechaun, they put a door in and the chimney and all that, those particular leprechaun or fairy or whatever that is. So there must be something to it, but yeah, I always wonder about videos like that. And like I said, it's hard. Like you can't get mad at a paranormal investigator who either tells you they don't know or it's a fake, because they don't. The truth is we don't know, because this stuff can be doctored so badly. So I mean, not badly, but so easily. This stuff can be doctored so easily. So it's hard for us. We do the click on there, then we can see it. But if we get something that's older, that doesn't have that where we don't have the ability to click on there and see what's going on, it's hard for us to say, okay, this was a double exposure, or this was this, or this was this. Or sometimes it's obvious that things are a double exposure. It just depends on what the video or photo looks like. So we're not trying to be Debbie. Just remember, you guys send stuff in. We're not trying to be Debbie Downers or anything, but we have to really take a close look at these photos and videos that you guys send us. And that does not only me, that is other investigators as well that receive stuff like this. You know, so Yeah, so I mean that's one of the things. But where fairies come in, and I think, like I said, a lot of the time you will run into them sometimes and not realize that you're dealing with fairies, and so that's a whole new section that I am adding using team research right now for when we go out on investigations. I'm adding a section on that so that the team, in fact, we're going to have a training coming up here very soon. Part of that training is going to include fairy folk, what to look for, because I think it's an interesting factor, because you don't think of them being in the United States, because a lot of the stories you hear about the sprites and stuff are over in England and Ireland and all those other places, but they are here. There are a lot of reports of them in the United States, and like I said, it's been few and far between for us, but we have come in contact with fairy folk off and on, over the last with this team. And like I said, what we have come in contact with, I mean, it's like anything else. There's good and bad in everything, right? There's always going to be good and bad. When you were growing up, and your mother said, okay, you got the good angel over here, and you got the bad angel or the devil over on this side, right? And they're battling to get you to do stuff. Be good, do this bad because it's fun. It's like that with anything, just like with aliens, right? This show, if you watch this enough, you realize that there's good aliens and there's bad aliens, right? The reptiles, the reptilians. So it goes the same thing. Any race, whether it's that, ghosts, or fairies, you're going to have good, you're going to have bad, or mischievous. You get the ones in the middle, like the Tommy knockers. They're not bad. They're not necessarily good, but excuse me, but they're mischievous. So you're going to get that, right? So yeah, so just remember that there's good and bad in everybody, and so it's hard. So that's one of the things that I want to work on going forward with my team after having contact. This last contact back with COVID, during COVID, was the fairies to know what to look out for with the team. To make sure that we're not overlooking that aspect of the investigations when we go out into the field. Because we want to make sure we're able to serve our clients fully. And make sure that they're treated well, and all that, and make sure that they have a complete investigation. So that's one of the things I'm adding to our investigation, Jerry. Jerry Bazer's on the team. So we're going to be studying fairy folk, and going through that. Um, is it scary to look into that stuff? I don't think so. I think for the people that are in the homes and the stuff is happening, it can be scary, because they don't know why. Like that gentleman, he's sitting there at his bar having dinner, and he sees the head bobbing, and the door opens and no one's there, and he sees the head bobbing as the Tommy knocker walks in. That can be unnerving, because you don't know what the heck that is, right? It's like anything else. You don't know what that is. So yeah, it can be unnerving. But is it scary? It depends how you look at it. And the other thing, you hear these stories about people inviting this stuff in, and that's the one thing is, if you start seeing stuff like that, and we're going to talk about this Friday too. That's part of it, because Nancy Mass is on vacation. We're going to talk about how to tell if your house is haunted on Friday. And that's the other thing too, is that when you start seeing things in your house, you might think it's Uncle Bob or whatever at first, but you never know. And so if you become very inviting with it, it's not a good idea. Until you talk to somebody, until you call me, or you talk to one of my psychics, or you want to find out what you're dealing with before you start having any kind of communication with it, even if it be bad, or if it be happy. Oh, it's Uncle Bob. Come on into the house and do this. You want to talk to people about it before you start messing around with it, because you don't know. That's what's bad. You don't know. It's like this thing with this book, Bram Stoker's Dracula, that we're reading. He did his research, because the vampire, and the stories, and you guys are going to probably poo-poo me for saying this, but the vampire has to be invited into your house before he can, or you have to say, you go to his castle, he invites you in. It's all about permission and the okay to have that happen. And just like with demonic forces, that's something that people will inadvertently invite into their lives without realizing they did it. And that's why you have to be really careful. And that's if you start getting activity in your house, or in the office that you work in, that you don't make it feel comfortable to be there. You don't think it's amusing. It's, oh, hi, ghosty, or things like that, because you don't know what this ghost is, or what this spirit is. So you have to be really careful with it. So that's all I say. I'm not saying that you don't talk to the ghosties in your house. Once you get somebody out to check it out and investigate and find out what it is, then you can talk all you want. If it's your long gone mother or whatever, have at it. I do it with my mom, my relatives here. There's people like all around me all the time. But you don't want to just start doing it, right away because you don't know, and it might turn around because there's as your deceased relatives, and the next thing you know, you've invited it in, and then all hell breaks loose, literally. And then we still have to come out, or a clergy has to come out and undo the mess. Okay, so you have to be really careful. That's why, you know, Ouija boards and all that. That's why paranormal teams tend to like seances. Don't table tip. Don't do any of that unless you know what you're doing, because it could turn ugly. It could just totally turn around on you and be really ugly. So I'm just saying. All right, but we're going to talk a lot more about that Friday. When I get into that, I'm like Nancy. I got a big stack of stuff to talk to you guys about on Friday. I got notes to follow, unlike today, because I just found out she wasn't going to be on the show. So it was either read the book again or just sit here and idly chit chat about fairies and other stuff. So I decided idly chit chat today. So yeah, but look, this hour's whipping by. It's really whipping by. We got what? We got 6 minutes left. No, 3 minutes left. That's pretty awesome. But yeah, so yeah, like I said, I think fairy sightings, as far as ghost hunting goes, and doing this, are as few and far between as demonic sightings used to be. But like I said, a lot of dark stuff here, that we run into, and that's the other issue, and that's something that I always talk about, and I'm like a broken record with, is that everybody sees this stuff on TV, and it's always dark because TV wants, the TV stations want ratings, and it doesn't matter what team goes out or whatever, they want ratings. So it went from being like, if you look at the old shows, when we started out the same as Ghost Hunters did on TV. That's when I started out filming another team, and at that time there were a lot more, like with Ghost Hunters, a lot more inconclusives. Where they didn't think it was paranormal and they couldn't prove it was paranormal. Same thing with us. Same thing with the that were going out, like the one I was filming. Inconclusives. A lot of that, or a lot of it, Uncle Bob or a family member. Harmless stuff. But as TV has evolved, and I'm not going to say what shows. You guys know. You guys know what shows I'm talking about. Certain shows brought this stuff to the forefront, and as TV has evolved, people have seen darker things. Right away, like I said, right away they think it's something's demonic coming into their house because that's what they're seeing on television. And that's not always the case. But like I said, like my dad used to say, if you wait long enough, you worry long enough, and you fret on it long enough, your dream will come true. That particular dream will come true, and that's what it is. And like I said, like even with these EVPs, you can create something that is dark without it necessarily being dark. It'd be just a figment of something you create that ends up being dark because you're harping on it all the time. And I'm not saying you got to walk around the house like a Stepford wife and be happy all the time, but you got to be really careful about that stuff. And you can't believe everything that you're watching on TV because you got to remember, I mean, we used to get calls to do TV shows all the time, and the unfortunate thing with that was they didn't want the kind of cases we had. They wanted us to produce demonic cases and produce dark cases. We didn't have a lot of dark cases for years. Even doing residential investigations, we didn't have run into a lot of dark stuff. So when they would ask us to do these TV shows, and I'd say, "Hey, we don't have that kind of stuff," then they just lose interest and move on to somebody else. So that's just the mentality because it's all about ratings. And then that mentality in turn gets put on film. It gets sent to you guys. It gets sent out to the public. And that's why you're inundated with these dark stories all the time. I don't watch those shows. I don't watch any of those shows. I watch like Paranormal 911. That's the only when I do watch it. I watch the shows with the police, the nurses, right? Stuff like that. I watch people with like trained observers. That's what I watch. I'm a journalist. I'm a trained observer. That's what I do. And so I feel that the information coming from them is more truer than something. And I hate to say it that way, but you see my point, right? So that's why, and it's not the people. Okay, let me clear this up too. It's not the people in the videos who see the stuff. It's the people going out to hunt the stuff that they're seeing in the videos. Okay, I'm seeing a trend of influencers now, and this is kind of scaring me right now. And there's a trend of a lot of influencers that are starting to ghost hunt. All right, buyer beware. Definite buyer beware, because I can, and I'm not gonna single anybody out. Okay, but I'm going to tell you right now, and this is what I predicted for AI. Everybody laughed at me, okay? And just like citizen journalists doing their little blogs, and their own one-sided blogs instead of being balanced. I'm telling you, buyer beware. This is going to be a mess. This is going to be a huge mess because these guys are not going to come out and do this stuff professionally because they have no clue how to do it. All right, they're coming out for the thrill. They're coming out for the followers, and they're coming out to scare people. All right, that's the thing. They're coming out for the thrill instead of doing it the proper way. So I'm expecting, and it's not happening right away, but I'm expecting to see a lot of weird stuff over on TikTok and whatnot because, yeah, I'm really afraid of, it sent a chill up, down my spine the other day when I saw saying, okay, I'm converting to ghost hunting. I'm going to be doing ghost hunts. And I thought, you have no clue what you're getting into. All right. Plus, this is the kind of thing that have to go out and help people because they've opened themselves up and try to do this ghost hunting, ha ha ha, for fun, ha ha ha. And you have to go in because something's followed them home, or they've gone into a house or a business and messed up the business because they had no clue what they were doing. It was all fun. It was all fun and games. So responsibility going out to these investigations, whether it's a commercial place or whether you're doing it at somebody's house, there's a big responsibility. I'm just saying. I'm closing on that today. That's been bothering me the last couple of days when I've seen that. It's kind of like when a certain TV show came out all those years ago when I had concerns too. And now when you look at this particular TV show, someone's always possessed. So we'll leave it at that. Okay, I'll just leave it at that rate. So that's now with a lot of influencers now are going to start ghost hunting, and that scares me. That scares me to death. Not that they're going to take my work away from me or from my team, but the fact that they're going in for fun, for the thrill of it. That's what scares me. So we'll see. We'll see how it pans out over the next 5, 6, 7 months as these guys start going out. These influencers start going out ghost hunting. Right. If you've got I mean, I do it too. I go live during ghost hunts. I don't do it for that though. I do it to teach people what to do during investigations and how to handle, okay, the proper way to do things. These people go out because they've got 500, 600 people watching them, and it's all about the thrill factor. And that's the fear I have about all this. So we'll see. We'll see. That's my prediction about these. Okay, guys. Well, I'm going to stop and shut up, and I will see you guys tomorrow. We're back at our usual time at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Nancy Timms is going to be with us. We're going to be talking alien abduction, and so she'll be with us at 6:30 p.m. Pacific tomorrow. Thank you all for listening to me ramble. I appreciate it. I'll reschedule Claire maybe for next week, and we'll get that going. And yeah, already I've got a couple for next week because they couldn't get into StreamYard or whatever, for whatever reasons. But I want to thank you all. I really appreciate it, and I will see you guys tomorrow 6:30. And oh yes, and the Patreon is coming together. I should have something by this weekend or Monday to present to you guys for the Patreon. We've been talking about that, to keep this show on the air and funded. As you can see right now, I'm at a $160 deficit to pay the bills, and I have a bill due on Sunday for $20 that I have to pay that I don't have. And so everything comes up next week on Wednesday, where I have to get my phone to get things taken care of. So yeah, so I'm looking for donations right now to keep the show on the air. So hopefully with the Patreon and get you guys to subscribe over there, we won't have that problem. If we get enough people over there subscribing, everything will be taken care of because that's what the Patreon is for, so that you guys will get extra stuff. It's not going to affect this show at all. This show will always be this show. The Patreon is where there's going to be extra stuff that you guys get to access every month and whatnot by becoming Patreon members. It also will help us stay on the air, and I don't stress out over bills and stuff. So that's what that's all about. So I'm just trying to I'm trying to put things together for that for you guys. Okay, That being said, if you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. We are equal opportunity here. We're just trying to get the word out about our show, and we're about to hit 900 subscribers at YouTube. I'm really excited. Our RSS feed has definitely gone up, and that's the one that goes out to Apple Podcasts and all those places. Excited about that. So we're definitely seeing some really cool stuff happening. All right, guys, I'll see you tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Thank you all for coming. Have a great day.